More transfer news, firstly in the Mirror, and this is the one we teased just before the break. Jordan to Saudi, they say. This is Jordan Henderson, the latest big-name Premier League star being targeted by Saudi Arabia, and importantly by the club now managed by Steven Gerrard, the Liverpool great as well. Could they be united in Saudi Arabia? Miguel, the thing he's got to weigh up here, which the Mirror intimates here, is could a move away from the Premier League, away from England, albeit lucrative as it might be in Saudi Arabia, end up costing him a place in the England squad at the Euros?
Well, that's one fascinating element to this. I think there's a lot of really interesting strands to this, what's a very fascinating story in its own right. First of all, there is a fact as well that Gerrard has obviously gone as a manager, but it feels like Henderson is, so far from what we've heard, the first English player at all, I think, to get such an offer. And it's interesting that he's the first one. And I mean, all we know is the offer on the table at the moment. We don't know about whether Henderson would even be interested in it. But there is, I think, a really fascinating discussion there as well. I mean, obviously, in all the debate about Saudi Arabia and the ambitions in sport, I think one of the more legitimate elements is for Saudi Arabian sport to grow its own league. Also say, a player going there isn't as much of an issue as other elements of this whole sports washing debate. But the fact that this comes as part of what is obviously a national project and a sports washing project, as many human rights groups have already said, by Mohammed bin Salman, means it can't fully be detached. I think it's why it's a particularly interesting question for Henderson himself, given that we're talking about someone who's probably one of the more socially conscious footballers. We only have to look at the lead he took at the start of the pandemic, and from that perspective, it can't really be escaped that there is a political dimension to some of this Saudi Pro League, and the decisions to go there, especially part of it, I suppose, is about legitimizing the current state structure, even if it's also about expanding Saudi sport. Now, I don't think it's quite at the scale of, say, Saudi Arabia buying Newcastle United or LIV Golf, but it's still part of the same wider project and provokes many of the same discussions before you even get to the football discussions. I mean, from a football perspective, it would also seem very hasty for Henderson to go there at this point in his career, given he's still got a fair bit to give, you would think. He's an elder statesman at Liverpool without being that old. And Gareth Southgate clearly loves him. And you would think this is going to be the summer. I mean, I know we've been saying this almost every summer, but now, given the way international football is aligning, this could well be England's best chance to win a trophy. And it would be a shame if that was to happen and Henderson wasn't there. But there are so many fascinating questions as part of this.
Yeah, and as Miguel points out there, he's got a lot to weigh up. Riath, I mean, could Steven Gerrard, the Gerrard factor, be the important decisive point on this?
I'm sure it would be a factor. I'd imagine the weight of the contract would be the main persuasion for him to leave Liverpool with 2 years on a contract and go and play in Saudi Arabia. This whole thing has been absolutely fascinating, the kind of Saudi move into sport. I've been working on this live thing for the last year in golf, and we've already seen these guys are serious, whether their motivation is sport washing or soft power in the region through sport, a combination of all of those factors. I'm sure it is. But the speed and their capability to do this has never been matched before in sport. They have almost limitless money through the public investment fund. This move is, we're in a new chapter now. We're even seeing someone like Steven Gerrard go. I think that was the one that really surprised me with it, because Steven Gerrard, when we think about him, we think about the sort of driving commitment of the player. He's making that move. I actually touched on this in my column in the Mail on Sunday. I think it just betrays a total lack of ambition on his part. I know he's given an interview talking about it today, and the club's ambition has to be right. I don't buy it. I see a manager who did well at Rangers, had a hard time at Aston Villa, and he's now thrown it in this league, which sure, it's going to expand. It's bringing over tremendous players, and we're already seeing that. But what is the scope of growth for a Saudi Arabian football club? They're not going to be playing in the Champions League. They're not going to be at the top table of world football. So I don't see what people stand to gain beyond the finance of going there. And the same goes then taking it back to Jordan Henderson, because we are talking about a player who can play in the Euros. We're talking about someone who's got 2 years on a contract with Liverpool, who's a club legend now. I find it extraordinary that he might consider going there, though of course that's still very much in debate. I think, my colleague Chris Wheeler's reported he thinks it's unlikely that he'll go, but we've seen the Saudis can be incredibly persuasive.